This is some hill. Hey y'all, my name is Nick and I travel across North America in search of famous graves and dark history locations. And in today's video, we're in beautiful Los Angeles, California, in search of the grave site of the one and only Ricky Nelson, as well as the plane crash site where he tragically lost his life. And as a bonus, we're gonna find the grave of his parents from the famous hit TV show back in the day, Ozzie and Harriet. Now, most people remember Ricky Nelson as one of the very first teen idols in rock and roll history, but his story doesn't just start with music. It actually starts on television, inside one of the most famous American families of the 1950s. And by the end of this video, we are going to retrace his entire journey from child star to rock icon to the exact location where his plane crashed and he lost his life. But first, you gotta tell a story about Ricky Nelson. You got to go back to the beginning. So from the very beginning, at the early life of Ricky Nelson, he was already born into a famous family. I mean, his parents were Ozzie and Harriet Nelson. And, together they starred in one of America's earliest hit sitcoms, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. What makes the story of Ricky Nelson a little different is his story wasn't like inspired by fame, I don't think. It was more so just like documented in real time. He grew up on camera, on screen, in people's living rooms. I can't imagine having that type of life, but that's how he grew up. And for Ricky, he didn't just grow up in the spotlight, he was raised in it. By the time he was a kid, millions of Americans were already watching his family every single week on television. Welcome everyone to Forest Lawn Memorial Park here in Burbank, California, just outside of Los Angeles. Actually, the Warner Brothers studios are directly across the street, and this is one of the most beautiful cemeteries I have yet to visit. So we're in the 1950s, and Ricky Nelson decides, I don't want to just be an actor on a family TV show. I want to be a rock and roll star, and that's exactly what he set out to do. At the time, rock music was literally exploding across America, and Ricky Nelson quickly found himself right smack in the middle of it. He released his first songs while still appearing on his family show, which gave him something really no other artist had at that time. It was basically a built-in national audience. And you know what's the cool part about this? It worked. His dream, his hopes all worked, and he became one of the biggest rock and roll stars of that era, just like Elvis Presley. He even kind of looked like Elvis Presley, if we're being honest. And I mean, the guy had, multiple #1 hits, sold millions of records, and became really one of the first true teen idols in music history. And what you got to keep in mind, like, that's a normal title today, but back then it wasn't a thing until these guys like Ricky came along. And then comes the early 1960s. Ricky Nelson, right at his peak. He had successfully done something very few people ever pull off. He transitioned from a child star into a legitimate musical artist. Starting as a child star and having so much success early on, I think it can be complicated, right? So like as the years go by, we start to see changes. The music scene is changing, there's new artists coming out, the sound's changing, and for Ricky Nelson, who always had, the spotlight on him, it starts to fade a little bit, and for the first time in his life, he has to go through this new shift. That's something we see all the time in these type of stories. The fame, it doesn't always last forever. But you know what does? The pressure to be at that level and keep that success and just keep going. Look at this hill. This part of Ricky's story kind of reminds me of what Elvis Presley went through. Elvis was the king of rock and roll, especially in the 50s, right? But when the Beatles came along in the 60s, the music was changing. Elvis was off making Hollywood movies, and Elvis had to adapt and change too. And I think the Beatles really bothered Elvis, just like I'm sure with Ricky Nelson, you know, what was working for so long wasn't working anymore. Now, by the time the 1970s and the 1980s roll around, Ricky Nelson, yes, he's still touring, he's still performing, still doing what he loves, but as you can imagine, it's not on the same level as it used to be, and I'm sure that had to bother him. But I mean, that's life. You just gotta keep going and going on. And so he continued playing shows across the country. Oftentimes they were in smaller venues, staying connected to his music and his fans. And unfortunately, that brings us to the final chapter of his story, a New Year's Eve performance that he never was going to make it to. All right, y'all, at this point, we are going to briefly leave this beautiful cemetery in California, and we're heading back to my home state of Texas to unfortunately see the final place where Ricky Nelson would breathe his last breath, at the plane crash site in Texas. Let's hop a plane and go there now. Okay, this location is very hard to find, but if you're wondering, it's on Farm Road 990 in DeKalb, Texas. And the only way I was able to find this was by searching this road on Google Maps, walking the street, and looking for this general location. And we'll talk about it. There's like one little hint that you get to find this spot. So let's go find the marker, and then I'll tell you exactly what happened here. If you could see, let me see. There's an old telephone pole that's broken. I'll zoom in right now. Center of your screen, there's a little like tree behind it. Right there is the marker. And why that's the marker is because when the plane was coming down from the sky, it actually hit the top of that telephone pole. And it remains broken in that same spot still to this day, all these years later. The date is New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1985, right here. Ricky Nelson's plane crashed while en route to a New York Eve concert in Dallas, Texas, my hometown. Well, they were about 3 hours away. They didn't make it. The plane was a 1944 Douglas DC-3, originally a World War II era aircraft that had been converted for private use. It was right behind me in the field back straight away where the plane crashed. All 7 passengers, including Ricky Nelson, his fiancée Helen, the 5 band members, all perished right there. Remarkably though, the 2 pilots survived, which is kind of crazy to think, because usually the pilots being in the front are the first to go, but they survived. The cause of the crash, well, investigators determined a fire started in the cabin, likely due to a faulty heater, which quickly filled the aircraft with smoke. I read somewhere they were trying to make a crash landing somewhere out in the open fields, but didn't happen. Like I said, they would have come down from the sky, center of your screen, the old telephone pole was. They went into that and they crashed somewhere straight ahead. It's on private property today, obviously. Cows, longhorns. Hello, cows, Texas longhorns. But right where that tree line is back there, that is where the plane went down. I do wonder if they have a marker there or not. Probably not, but like I said, that pole is the only marker today. Fair to say the tragedy shocked not only fans but the world at the loss of a early rock and roll teen idol, a man who transitioned from TV to what was going to be a huge musical career, but unfortunately ended too early in the field behind me. Thankfully, his sons, the Nelson brothers, went on to have pretty successful careers in the 80s and 90s. All right, so what I'm going to share with you right now is there's a museum in this town that actually has the pieces of the plane still around today that Ricky Nelson died inside. And what I didn't know is I just thought it was a local museum you can go into, see, and this and that, but it's privately owned and the owners aren't always there. From what I found out later on, you have to call ahead and basically schedule and make sure you're going to be there. So I didn't do that. I'm just here to show you guys what some of the pictures look like inside. But if you ever go here, make sure you call ahead, unlike I did. And yeah, this is the exact plane pieces, what's left, that Ricky Nelson crashed in. All right, y'all, with that being said, let's get the heck out of windy and today particularly cold Texas and head back to Los Angeles to see the final resting place of the one and only Ricky Nelson. And just like that, my friends, we made it back to sunny California, even though it's not too sunny today. All right, now that we've talked about the life and career and legacy of Ricky Nelson and saw the place where unfortunately that plane went down, we are now going to search this very hill behind me to find the final resting place of Ricky Nelson along with his parents, Ozzie and Harriet. They're buried somewhere here. This is some hill. I feel bad stepping on people's graves because I usually try to avoid it, but they're just everywhere. There's no avoiding it. All right, Ricky, where are you? Wow, that took so long to find because findagrave.com is helpful, but not always are the pinpoints accurate. So I was looking here forever. And not only that, but I was looking for Rick or Ricky Nelson, not Eric Nelson. And I think I passed him right up. But Ricky Nelson is right here. Here lies Ricky Nelson, or Eric Nelson, beloved father and son, May 8th, 1940 to New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1985. So Ricky Nelson was only 45 when he passed away. From growing up one of America's first television shows with his parents to becoming one of the biggest names in early rock and roll history, his life was lived almost entirely in the public eye. So many people that we cover on my channel, it's not just about how someone died, it's about how they lived their life, their legacy, the tragic moments up till their end, what they left behind. That's what I try to give y'all in these detailed episodes, not just the grave and where they died. It's about their lives. Ricky's two sons, the Nelson twins, they went on to have a huge career in the 80s, and yeah, they're still around, they're still rocking. Here's Ricky right below us, and just a few steps away, somewhere down here, I found them, are his parents, a few rows down if I don't fall. Here they are. Ozzy and Harriet. Holy cow. That is something from the famous TV show Ozzy and Harriet. These are the same parents who brought Ricky into the spotlight, the same family that millions of people once watched together every single week on the adventures of Ozzy and Harriet. How cool is that? In a way, everything kind of comes full circle here for the Nelsons. They started together in this lifetime, and now in death, they're all resting together here on this beautiful hill in Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Los Angeles. Now, Ricky's brother is not here, but he's not too far away. He's buried about 45 or so minutes away from here at Pierce Brothers, in the same cemetery that Marilyn Monroe is, actually. But yeah, Ozzy and Harriet and Ricky are 2 rows up right there. Their entire lives played out on screen, on TV. Now we're here today, hanging out with them for a little bit at the end of their story. Wow. At the end of the day, I think Ricky Nelson helped really define what it meant to be a teen idol. He bridged the gap between television and music in a way that really hadn't been done before. Even today, his influence can still be seen in artists who followed that same path. I like to believe his music still lives on, his story still gets told, and places like this, they make sure he's never forgotten. Well, y'all, we're saying goodbye to Ricky Nelson as well as Ozzy and Harriet, and that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you want to see more famous grave videos or dark history locations, the links will be here and here. Check out my playlist, give us a like, and I'll see you all in the next one.